Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. We are in season 6, and we are so excited to welcome Ms. Nadja Webb, who is the EVP of Programming and Business Operations and Deputy General Counsel for BET. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, before we get into a little bit about you and your role at BET and your journey there, we make all our guests play a round of legal hot topics. So, today we'll be discussing two topics that have flooded the news. And the first one is Don Lemon and a few other journalists were recently arrested for interfering, or they're alleging with interfering with freedom of religion, which is a First Amendment right. And Don Lemon and the other journalists, and even the student that was working with him, who has also recently been arrested for his assistance with Don Lemon in covering this protest at the church of an alleged ICE agent, is saying that they were simply expressing their freedom of freedom of the press by documenting what had happened. And so we have these two, freedoms kind of going up against each other, both constitutional rights. And so I would love to just hear your thoughts on how this may play out, what judges will be looking at in terms of maybe how active their role was, to see if it crossed the line from just being pressed and documenting what was happening versus actively planning and or participating in it.
So, constitutional rights are frequently in conflict with one another. And, I think I would not be surprised if this is something that went to the Supreme Court, because I think that it's not, I think the interest in this case is not, just isolated to this particular, to these participants. I think it really has nationwide import. Journalism, has often been referred to as like a fourth branch of government. So in addition to our judicial and legislative and executive branches, we've got like a free press that functions as like an independent watchdog over all three. And, our founding fathers saw this as so critically important that they saw freedom of press as protected First Amendment speech, a freedom rather that's protected by the First Amendment. And, that's not just a luxury. It's really a structural safeguard for democracy. And I don't think that that's dramatic. I think that's actually why it's viewed as this fourth branch. That's almost like a check. So yes, Don Lemon alleges he was there just live streaming and covering the events. Obviously, the federal government, was sort of taking the position that this was not just coverage, that he was participating and possibly even orchestrating the protests that disrupted the church service. And, really, while we understand that there is a protected First Amendment right for coverage, it's not absolute. And it really is going to turn on the very specific facts of whether or not Don was there in his capacity as a journalist. Was he identified as such? Was he sort of, did he direct some of the events that were happening on the ground, or was he really just observing? And that's a very fact-specific kind of inquiry. But beyond that, I think that many advocates for free speech see this as such a critical case to pay attention to, because journalists frequently report from the inside of events as they unfold, right? Like whether it's war-torn countries or protests or what have you. And so what does it mean to be arrested for reporters being arrested for proximity or association with an event, right? I mean, it could really deter coverage, which is not something that we want, especially if it's something that's a politically sensitive event. And, so it could also have just a real, just chilling effect on journalism, period. So, I once again think that this is something that will likely make its way through the courts, and it would not surprise me at all if this became a Supreme Court case.
It's interesting that you say that because as soon as you said that, I didn't think about that. I was like, oh, yeah, this would be a very cool Supreme Court case for law students to come. I mean, this, like you said, this is bigger than just Don Lemon and the other journalist and the student that was arrested. And I think you're right. What's important about this in particular is how the facts are going to play out. And something that someone told me, they are alleging that. Number one, it wasn't just, okay, he was just at the protest, that there was like a planning meeting before.
Hmm.
And of course, an argument could be, well, he was doing a whole expose. So his journalism maybe
Hmm.
started with the planning meeting and it went all the way through the actual protest. I guess you could argue that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I didn't realize that was something that had happened. So I was like, oh, wow, that's an interesting fact that could really be played up and saying, hey,
Yeah.
you took more of an active role. But something Don did, and I don't know if the other three journalists did it
Yeah.
because he is a very smart man. He actually put his disclaimer on camera. And I'm
Mm.
paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines, I'm not here for the protest. I'm here to document. Like he, thank God. Like
Yeah.
he said it on camera. He made it very clear what his role was there that day. And so I'm happy that he did that. I don't know
Yeah.
if he thought something was bigger was going to come out of this, but thank God he did because he said on camera his disclaimer that really he was just there as a journalist. And so that's obviously going to strengthen his argument. So like you said, it's going to turn on the facts. It's going to turn on
Yeah.
the facts,
Yeah.
like most cases turn. And so we will be watching this story closely. We know you're at BT, you're an
Yeah.
attorney, but you're also in media. And so I understand, even for your own reporters and things that cover stories and things like that, like you don't want to have a chilling effect on media where media may be afraid to send like their journalists and reporters out to cover things because they think that they may be
Mhm.
arrested. It can definitely have some really big implications. So yes, that we will keep a very close eye on that. I believe there's a hearing today. He has some sort of initial hearing today, and this will probably go
Mhm.
throughout the spring. Our second hot topic, Representative Jasmine Crockett, who's been on the podcast twice now,
Yeah.
is running for Senate. That was something that broke probably, I think, like right before the end of the year, going into the new year. Everyone was waiting to kind of see, what she was going to do. And a lot of people didn't understand what was happening. And even I had to kind of go and kind of do a little bit of my research about how legally there can be redistricting done lines, and that historically that has been done to keep certain people even from voting or having a certain group
Mhm.
of people vote more in terms of a demographic, and that this isn't new, unfortunately, what has happened in her district, and that basically her new district would probably not be a district that would vote for her. And so she is, she's put her hat in the Senate race. She's working to first achieve the Democratic representative status because she would have to beat out the other Democrat in the primary and then go in the regular race later this year. But yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on, the little, I don't know, your extensive knowledge on redistricting, but like just your understanding of legally how that's done and how historically that's impacted voting and how this has now trickled into her race.
Yeah, well, I can't claim to be an expert, but what I can tell you is gerrymandering is not new. It has been something that has been used for decades and quite frankly by both parties, to be honest with you. I think right now it is sort of reached a bit of a feverish pitch, I would say, because the perception is that it's being used really inappropriately or to a more extreme degree than perhaps in years past. And we probably need some kind of like political or legal, historian to say whether or not that's accurate. But what I can say is usually during redistricting happens every 10 years after the census, and it's meant to sort of be in response to demographic shifts and population shifts. And so in Texas, as I understand it, they picked up 2 additional seats the last time the census in 2020. But what they tried to do, and by the way, for those people who don't know gerrymandering, I think sometimes if you looked at certain congressional maps, people would be very surprised because they can look absolutely ridiculous, right? Like you kind of think, oh, it might be done by a county or a town or what have you, but that's not the case at all. I mean, literally, the maps can look like these bizarre, sort of strange, like jigsaw puzzle of lines. And when you gerrymander, you're literally often like either they kind of call it packing or cracking, like you're either trying to pack all of the likely voters for a particular party into one area, or you crack it in the sense that if you know that there's a real concentration of voters in one area, you may draw it so that you kind of encapsulate potential voters for the opposing party. So if you think about, the best example would be like if you were to take an urban area that you thought was going to lean very Democratic and you combined it with like rural voters that you thought were going to be leaning more Republican. That would be an example of gerrymandering. And that's precisely what Texas did. I mean, they looked at, I think it was specifically Houston and Austin, which are urban areas. And they also, the argument goes, looked at particularly like concentration of Black voters, and they sort of redistricted it in a way that they were going to dilute the voting power of those groups. And I only called into I sort of bring up the historical context to say that both parties have participated in this, but I think for the average voter who doesn't really know this, it can seem incredibly undemocratic in the small d sense, right? Because you just really believe that one person would vote, and if I'm in this area and I'm going to have a representative that reflects the constituency. But what is the constituency if it's like combined in these squiggly ways? So for someone like Jasmine Crockett, who was a congresswoman, she, I think, understood rightfully that this, was going to really suppress the constituents that had voted her into power. And so I think, one of her options, was to run for Senate, which, has a completely different type of system. So, she faces a real uphill battle, obviously, but, I think that it's important for people to understand that is what is driving her interest in running for Senate.
Absolutely. I definitely think she probably would have just renewed her congressional path.
Yeah.
Not to say that she wouldn't eventually run for Senate, but it was
Yeah.
almost like she was backed into a corner and had to do so. And so, yes.
The only other thing I would add is that the reason why I said right now people feel like it has picked up this like feverish pitch of gerrymandering is that in response to what was going on in Texas and the fact that it was sort of happening at an off period, which was very unusual, you had these reactions where, California said, well, then.
I was going to say, California ended up doing something to kind of counter it.
Yeah, they actually passed legislation because once again, historically, this would only happen, the redistricting would happen after a census. So in order, because Texas was doing this in an off year, it was, everybody felt like they then had to counteract this. And it's interesting because, once again, like whether that's right or wrong, that California said, well, we're going to do this too.
Right.
And then it spread to other places. And so there's certain Republicans who are now crying foul. And a lot of the Democrats are like, you set this in motion. You put this in motion.
Fair game. If you can do it, we can do it.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I don't know. And depending on how you look at it, it may just be a race to the bottom because this is where I will interject my perspective. I do think it's unfortunate when you start to believe that like that representation is being diluted for whatever reasons, for whatever party. That becomes unfortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, we wish her well. She has our endorsement, so we wish her well. And anything she wants to run, she's a firecracker. She really is for the people. She's also
Hmm.
an attorney. Um, so we love Jasmine Crockett over here. So we're still rooting for her and all her endeavors. And obviously, we wish her well with her path, and we hope that she's successful in her primary so that she can actually, even to your point, stand a chance in the regular election. With that being said, thank
Hmm.
you for playing our round of hot topics. We really appreciate like your perspective. And your kind of like your legal expertise. I
Yeah.
definitely love what you said about the Supreme Court thing with the Don Lemon case. I never thought about it that way, but I could see it going in that
Hmm.
direction. It's definitely going to be a fight. But with that being said, this interview is actually all about you. So, for those that do not know you, tell us, who were you before you were, a EVP of ET, or, an attorney? Like, who were you before this path?
So, I always like to start this discussion about, law with me in law school, because I don't think there's anything, that I did in law school that would have suggested that I would be where I am now. I had absolutely no interest in entertainment or media.
Interesting.
I think in law school, like often, sports and entertainment or media was like the sexy work that people wanted to pursue. And I was never on any of the entertainment, committees, or did any of the things that would have positioned me. And in fact, I wanted to go into public interest law. So over the summer, I spent one summer, well, the first summer I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York. I then the next year I split my summer at a law firm and at the now Legal Defense Fund. Um, I was the president of the Civil Liberties Union at Harvard. I mean, I just did nothing that would have suggested entertainment. And when I graduated, what I really wanted to do was go to either a civil rights organization or, a women's rights organization specifically focused on reproductive rights. And a lot of those organizations, they have very few staff attorneys. The now Legal Defense Fund actually shared the building with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Lambda and a few others. And I would just walk those halls and just be like, oh my God, this is like, Thurgood Marshall, walk these halls. And I was just in awe. And like without exception, everybody just told me, like, you will not get a job right out of law school. Like you need to go get some other experience. Um, so I always laughed that I couldn't like beg my way into this like job that would have paid me. I would have been like just above the poverty level. So I went to a law firm. I went to Weil Gotshal and which is here in New York City, and I was in the commercial litigation group, and I was figured, look, I'll just learn some basics of the law, and I will pay down some debt because I had lots of debt. And when I was at the firm, I worked very long hours. It was a very tough environment. Well, Gotchel has a certain reputation, I would say, and it lived up to that reputation in terms of work. But I also happened to just be put, it was complete serendipity. I didn't advocate for this type of work or position myself in any way, but I was put on a case that was I was working with a partner who happened to have quite a few media clients, and it was a case representing Sony Pictures and writers and directors and producers of a movie called Philadelphia. And we actually went to trial, which is exceedingly rare in some of these, these law firms. You kind of think of yourself as like a paper lawyer. Um, and I think I really caught the bug. I mean, I was a litigator once again. So, I was not doing anything similar to what I'm doing now. But once I decided I wanted to leave the firm, I sort of transitioned first into music. So I went to Sony Music, and I worked there for a few years. I had no transactional experience, so I was very fortunate that my boss at Sony Music, the person who hired me, had this perspective that he was like, I'll just take people who I think are smart and capable and eager, and I'll layer in the training.
Mhm.
And they also had a bifurcated business and legal affairs. So I was in legal affairs, and then you sort of graduated to business affairs. Um, and so I worked there, and then I moved to another music company, and then I came to what was then Viacom, now Paramount,
Mhm.
working. I was sort of their music lawyer, working
Mhm.
at MTV and VH1, primarily on their ancillary products, but also some of their music programming. And then at some point, I made the transition completely into to their other programming. Eventually, I was running business and legal affairs for MTV and VH1 and BET and CMT and Logo. And then in 2020, I and I should just mention, like, I was not bored with what I was doing because every year I just felt like there was something added to my plate or a new channel, or so I certainly was not bored. But in 2020, I had the opportunity to come over to BET in an operational role, and I really um, I was just eager to try something different. So I maintained business and legal affairs for BET, but then took
Mhm.
on the operational responsibilities. Um, and I it's just been honestly just an absolutely like thrilling place to work. And I say that because in addition to having sort of that stretch opportunity to move into an operational space, I was able to eventually add the scripted original programming group to my portfolio, which included casting and talent relations. I was
Mhm.
also able to add physical production to my portfolio. So I just felt like it was a super dynamic uh,
Mhm.
space. We were, when I started, we were a linear channel, um, but I knew that we were opening up an SVOD service. We were opening up BET Plus, so I knew that was coming. And I worked. In fact, I'd worked on the transactions before I moved over. And then 2 years later, we opened up BET Studios. So it's been really exciting because
Well, I was gonna say what you've described. I know you didn't obviously start in this journey to become a entertainment and media attorney, because I guess that's the niche that you're in now. But you're describing an entertainment law student's dream in terms of a path. I mean, you've done music, now you're in TV and programming. Definitely have been able to be very fortunate to kind of be in all spectrums of the entertainment field. So it's very very impressive. I know you attended Harvard Law. Um, Before you even went to law school, though, was it just like I want to be a lawyer because this is something that would be a good profession? I mean, could you have maybe been something else? What specifically put you on the path to say, okay, I'm done with college, I'm going to go to law school? Was there something that happened that said, okay, this is where I should go in terms of my next step?
it's a good question. I mean, so I went to Wesleyan University for undergrad, and um, Wesleyan has a reputation of being a very lefty kind of liberal school, and I think that's certainly what got me interested in public interest writ large. And I thought that, and I think this is right, but I felt that a legal degree would sort of be a really important tool for the activism. I mean, you can sort of
Mm-hmm.
public interest is, if you want to play in that space, there's so many different entry points and so many ways that one can participate. But I felt like the law was like something that could be very powerful. And I really came to that. I mean, my junior year, I took a con law class, and it was a con law class obviously meant for undergrads, not what
Mm-hmm.
you would experience in law school. But
Right.
I remember just I don't know what I thought when I signed up for the class, but I remember um, it being really eye-opening because there were certain things that I just had never, I never, you hear about due process or you hear about
Mhm.
the Commerce Clause, and they sort of touched on these different things, but I didn't really fully appreciate um, how, sort of how our government actually, how the Constitution is sort of activated through government. And actually, ironically, I think that's the first time I had really learned about gerrymandering.
Mm,
Now that I think about it,
interesting.
so it's like a full circle here.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so once again, I think I thought that would be, it's not the exclusive tool, but I thought that that would be a really
Mhm.
useful, powerful tool. And I didn't have any lawyers in my family.
Family. Yeah,
No.
okay. And, I say this statistic a million times, and I'm going to say it until it raises, but less than 5% of attorneys are Black in this country, and less than
Mm,
2.5% are Black women. So it
mm,
is not common for people to have lawyers in their family
yeah.
or even maybe even know a lawyer. So it's interesting that it was like your own onus. You were like,
Hmm.
I'm going to go into this type of work. This sort of degree can potentially take me down this path. What was your favorite class at Harvard Law, and and just in general, um, what is your favorite moment from Harvard Law?
Oof, favorite moment. Um, Gosh, I know that sounds so silly. Both of those questions are actually tough questions.
Are they
Um,
okay?
I know. In spite of all the other things we talked about, I
Uh,
I think I I had a really dynamic professor for property my first year, and I think that really challenged me. I'm not even sure if I really think this was my favorite class, but it's what sticks out as like we discussed property in every conceivable sense, including like ownership of human beings, right? Like, what does that mean? And I just remember, it wasn't just foundational, meaning like, oh, we're going to give you the broad-based understanding of property. It was really, Harvard tends to be pretty theoretical, and I think he really spoke a lot about sort of what law, not just what it is, but what it should be, what it could be, and the evolving notions of property. So I would say that would probably
that
be,
was probably my hardest course. I would
yeah,
say real property and con law. I have a
uh-huh.
deeper appreciation for con law now versus in law school. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
for
this is
sure.
so
Well,
hard. Like, oh
because
my
I
gosh.
mean, con law, it's just every single day we open
Yeah, yeah, I have a
up the
deeper
newspaper.
appreciation for it now. But yeah, I would say con law and real property were like some of my hardest courses when I was there, but definitely have a deeper
Yeah.
appreciation for them now. I mentioned the statistic about, less than 2.5% of uh, the attorney population are Black women. So we definitely are, we get the minority twice, being women and being of color. Could you tell us a moment, whether it be in school or in any working environment, where maybe you felt as if maybe you were male or if you were maybe white, that maybe you would have been treated differently?
There's so many
Just like
times.
my whole
Well,
career.
first I'll tell a funny story, which
Okay.
is when as I mentioned, when I was at the law firm, I worked on a case that actually did go to trial. And granted, I was a young woman, but I was probably at this point 2 to 3 years out of law school. So I wasn't that young. But I came to court and I had on a suit
Hmm.
and I back then I didn't wear a ton of makeup. So maybe I looked particularly young. I don't know what, but um, I mean, without exception, there were at least 3 or 4 people who assumed I was like some kind of, I don't even
Like
know
the
what, like
clerk.
bag handler. I don't even know if they thought I was a clerk. I mean, I was just like, I'm like, I don't know if back in the day, like they had these things called elephant bags. They were like these
Oh,
giant
yeah. Yeah.
litigation bags.
Mhm.
And so I'm carrying these things. It's like, I mean, I truly don't know if they just assumed I was like literally the bag handler. But the court reporter, the clerk, all these folks just kept directing me to do these things that obviously signaled that they did not think I was a lawyer, much less like someone who was, I was
Mhm.
third seating. I was not, I wasn't, first or second in line, but I was third seating, so you have some proper attorney. But beyond that, I mean, there are so many times that that I've been in spaces that historically just were very white and very male, more than I can count. Um, and honestly, for many Black folks, we've just had to navigate spaces like that all throughout our lives. Like whether it's, for me, I went to a predominantly white
Mm-hmm.
high school and then a predominantly white college and on and on and on. So it's not new. And I
Right.
think we've had to, we've had to like just build up that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's certainly not always easy navigating those spaces, but
Mm-hmm. Well, before you even finished the story, I already knew where the story was going.
so predictable.
I feel like every, especially Black female, haven't heard as much from the Black males, but every time I ask this question of someone that's practiced at any, they typically include a court story where they think that one girl was like, "Oh, they thought I was the defendant." They were like, "Oh no, defendants have to sit over." She was like, "Wow, I can't even get the secretary. I'm the criminal. I'm the
Right, I'm
defendant."
the criminal.
Yeah, so even before you finished the story, I knew where the story was
Yeah,
going. I wasn't sure what they were going to identify you as, but yes, I think we're all familiar with that being identified as the lawyer. And it's just, again, when people think of lawyer in this country, they think white, they think
yeah,
male. It's uphill battle, but this is part of the reason why we have this podcast, because we want to put people on that look like you and look like me, to encourage the next generation to come up. With that being
yeah.
said, um, if someone wanted to pursue, because I mean, you did a very uh, thorough job of kind of giving us your journey to where you are now. Um, you weren't really even looking to be, this big media and entertainment attorney, and landed in this amazing role. But if someone kind of already knows, like they already know that this is their path, they want to work at a media company or a music label. Um, do you have any advice on how they could, kind of ensure that they go down that lane, other than,
Oh,
obviously going
sure.
into law
No,
school?
no, no, of course. I mean, I would say in law school, first of all, I mean, there are some law schools that have what they say is entertainment law. I say there is no such thing, really. I mean, if you were to take an entertainment law class, oftentimes that's probably very and I don't say this dismissively, but it's also often with like clinicians or people who are, practicing attorneys, and it's a very technical kind of, but you don't need that, right? It's like you need the foundations, contracts, maybe taking a class in negotiations, copyright could be helpful, or anything that deals with IP, generally patents, trademarks, et cetera. Um, but once you have those foundations, I would say, it does help if you have things that are on your resume that signify an interest. I mean, I really got kind of lucky, but I know that there are some people who, when they're hiring, they are looking for a demonstrated interest, and it's like a conundrum, right? It's like you're penalized for not having the experience, but you can't get the experience because so it's this terrible conundrum. But if there are things that you can do, any volunteer experiences, volunteer lawyers for the arts is an example. I don't, at least here in New York City, we have volunteer lawyers for the arts, which is act, people who don't have entertainment experience are paired with practitioners to like work on smaller cases. And it's just a way to sort of, you know, um, get some hands-on training. And, if you can, and I say this, realistically, if you can afford to do an internship somewhere, of course, that would be fantastic if you can do that. I certainly did not have, I needed my summers to have something, right? I mean, I didn't need it to be, you know, I could be modestly compensated, but I really needed, I could not afford to do something for free. And a lot of times working, having true internships in the media and entertainment are often unpaid or,
Mhm.
or low paid. So I know people have to make decisions that fit their lifestyles. But if you can do that, certainly that's also, not just a way to demonstrate to future employers that you're interested, but also for you to pressure test whether you really want to do this. I mean, um, it's not for everyone, some
Mhm.
people, and also to learn if you on what side of the house you want to be on. I've always worked for either the platform, the label, the network. But some people really prefer working directly with talent. I'm like, I would probably strangle talent if I had to like work with them every single day. But that's just, it's a personal preference, right? You have
Mhm.
to, it's a very different type of practice. So yeah, that would be my
Yeah,
advice to them.
absolutely. I love that you said specifically New York, and I'm sure LA and some other major
Yeah.
cities. I always tell people if you want to do entertainment and media law, you have to start thinking about moving to these places. Maybe you
Yeah.
already going to law school in some of these places. If you're already in New York or Atlanta or LA, it's going to make it that much easier to access the opportunities, whether they be volunteer or paid. So if you already
But
kind
believe it or
of,
not, it's easier now. I mean, before it really was just New York or
yeah,
LA.
yeah,
And arguably, if you were wanted to do film and television, it was just LA at one point in time. And now, I'd say Atlanta's a big hub, even
yes.
Nashville, Austin, depending on. So they're really, that's not a tremendous number of places given the whole scope of the United States, but at least you have more options now.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it's interesting that you say about talent because, when I think of the sort of careers and the sort of paths that our dear Generation Z wants to do, while I love that people can be self-employed and self-empowered as content creators and they can go into the arts and be actors and singers and in the sports. We still need all of that. But I also say we also need lawyers, though. We still also need doctors. We still need people in these what I consider traditional professions. And so, what what do you suggest as attorneys try to mentor the next group? How do we make it exciting again that, being a lawyer is cool. It can be exciting. It can be interesting. I mean, look at what you do. Clearly, what you do is not boring. Um, but how do we kind of, again, everyone's not going to obviously be a lawyer, doctor, engineer, et cetera, et cetera. But we do need some
Yeah.
people to still want to do it because at some point I'm going to retire. At some point you're going to retire.
Yeah.
So we have to have a group to replace it. So what do you
Yeah.
think Black attorneys can do now to help encourage the next group to be interested in the legal profession?
Well, I would say I think it's terribly exciting now that people feel the that they have these opportunities to do things that honestly, when I was coming up, I sort of just had very traditional notions of the different pathways that were available to me, rightfully or wrongfully. It's really just what was either like modeled at home or not modeled at home. Quite frankly, I didn't have doctors or business people in my family either. So I'm I love that people can be content creators and entrepreneurs and all these different things. So I would never try to dissuade folks from doing that. The one thing I would say though is that it has always been true that a legal degree is incredibly versatile.
Mhm,
It is not, there's so many different career paths that are open to you, whether
mhm,
you want to go into politics or you want to become a lobbyist or you want to become, you want to go in-house, you want to practice at a law firm. There's so many different things that one could do. And also, quite frankly, I'm really surprised at the number of creatives that I know personally who have law degrees. And I mean, really a pretty significant number, whether they're writers, they're
mhm,
network executives, and some of them have never. I can think of three off the top of my head that never even practiced law, and they
mhm,
still feel like the legal foundation was incredibly helpful to them,
mhm,
and applicable in their daily lives, whether it's
mhm,
like them having to, make decisions around how deals are going to be made for creatives
Mhm.
that come under their purview, or maybe their own contracts or what have you, or just being a sort of literate person. I think
Mhm.
it's a really versatile degree.
Mhm.
And when you're in law school and just panicked about grades, sometimes, or maybe I'm projecting, there were times where I just couldn't appreciate how truly intellectually stimulating the classes were. Like if I could have just like if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have just like taken a breath and been like, just don't think about the grades for a minute and just try to really experience the journey, so to speak, because
Mhm.
it's an incredible experience, and it's hard to sort of tell a non-lawyer that, but like you're thinking about thinking a lot when you're
Mhm.
in law school.
Yeah, you're trying to survive. You're trying to get through. You're trying to keep a certain GPA
Yeah,
so you can stay in school. Then you're graduating.
yeah,
Then you have to take at least one bar to become licensed. It's a
yeah,
path. And I get it. Sometimes people say, "Well, I
yeah,
could just turn on my phone camera and make $1 million and go viral, and I'm going to make more money than you as a lawyer." I say, "Yeah, you probably will if
yeah,
you go viral."
yeah.
I think to your point, even as a creative, as you mentioned before, you actually know some that have those law degrees. Like it's not going to go to waste. Trust me, even if it's just understanding your own
Yeah.
contract. So I think that's a great way to look at how to encourage the next group coming along, making sure
Hmm.
they know that it's a very flexible degree, a degree that you can do a lot of things with. So I thank you for that tip. What is your favorite part about your job? And then I'll say, what is the most difficult? Because it does seem to be very glamorous. I mean, BET is a staple. So people hear BET, MTV, certain things, they get so excited, like, oh my God, you have like the best job. What's like the best thing, like the thing you really love, and then the thing that maybe people don't know that's kind of like difficult about what you have to do?
Well, it really is the best job. So I and I sincerely say it, like it really has been like such an honor working here at BET. Um, I will, this is a little hard um to articulate precisely, but here at BT, like we work incredibly hard. We're actually fairly, thinly staffed relative to, other organizations, like maybe if you're at Unilever or what have you, I don't know. But I think it makes us incredibly nimble. I think we are, what we're able to do, I think is pretty incredible. And you're very aware that you are impacting narratives about Black culture. We
Mhm.
help drive Black culture, and community engagement, and that's a real privilege. I mean, I sincerely believe it's a privilege.
Mhm.
And honestly, one of the best parts of my job, and this part that I was trying to struggle to articulate, is that you're working with people that really become almost like family. Like you feel, it's like just like any other family. Like you've got
Mhm.
some dysfunction here and some amazing things there, but you really feel like everybody is, sort of working with a common
Mhm.
goal and a mandate and a purpose that's beyond just the work in front of you, and that's really special.
Mhm.
And in
Well,
terms
that
of,
actually leads me to my last question for you
mhm,
before we close out with our Black Excellence Moment of the Week. Again, like you said, BT was originally obviously created by a Black power couple. It was created with a specific purpose to make sure our voice and our perspective was out there.
mhm.
Obviously, ownership and executive, things have changed since then. But I do think, to your point, the purpose and the mandate appears to be the same. So, with that being said, what is anything you could share coming up with BET that people should expect? Because I mean, I know you mentioned like before it was, not publicly known that there would be BET Plus, right? There was something coming down. What is BET kind of doing now that you could potentially share with our audience that they should be on the lookout for on the community side or the business side, the legal side? What can our audience expect next for BET?
So I would say, for us, we are always, for those in the senior leadership team, I think we really view us ourselves as like custodians of the brand, and as stewards of the brand. We want to make sure that it's around for another, 45 years. I think we just celebrated our 45th anniversary. And you want to make sure that it just continues to be relevant. And so, without getting into any like specifics, right, I would just say that what we're looking to do is figure out how we can push the brand into, like how do we meet our audience wherever they are, right? So at one point in time, it was just a linear play, but people are consuming content in so many different ways. And we
Mhm.
want to be in all of those places and spaces, right? So whether it's, digital writ large, like podcasting and social media and what have you, we want to be there. Whether it's like experiential, we have BT experience that we'd like to bring that is coming back, and we want to be able to touch and feel our fans and consumers. So that's really the mandate, right? It's like, how do
Mhm.
we push the brand so that it continues to evolve and meet our consumers where they are?
Absolutely. I know you have NAACP coming up. BT
Mm-hmm.
is broadcasting that and has been doing that for the last couple of years. And our traditional award shows don't always honor or
Mm-hmm.
recognize our artists, whether it be behind or in front of the camera. And so I think it's a very beautiful ceremony. I always feel at home, like even when I'm on the red carpet with the Black Lawyer podcast, interviewing people, like I just feel like we're one big family at that award show. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably, I go to a lot of award shows and it's probably like one of my favorites, if not my favorite. So I really appreciate what you guys have done with
Yeah.
NAACP. I think it's awesome. It's amazing. And even what you mentioned with BET experience, I think that was
Mm-hmm.
originally how we connected, that I was looking to actually bring a legal panel to
Yeah.
BET because I saw that there was like a finance panel. They had these, I'm like, but there are no lawyers on the panel.
Mm-hmm.
We need to
Mm-hmm.
talk about how people protect their IP and et cetera, et
Oh
cetera.
yeah, we got to fix that.
Yes. So Black Lawyers Podcast wants to be a
Okay.
part of that. We actually also we've had an event 3 years in a row with some of actually your BET talent. We do like a talent meets representation event
Yeah.
where talent can meet lawyers, talent can meet agents. So whether you're already on
Mm-hmm.
TV or you're, looking to go in that path, representation is really important.
Yeah.
So, yes, we're definitely excited to talk to you guys in the near future about how we can help you guys, like you said, meet the audience where it is through
Mm-hmm.
something such as the BET experience. We would love to assist with that, since we're already there during BET weekend covering the events for the week. So that is something we will be really excited to continue to talk to your team about. We do end our episode with Black Excellence Moment of the Week. And so our Black Excellence Moment of the Week, we have again someone, not I wouldn't say necessarily creative, but she's in sports. We have Jordan Childs, who is an Olympic gold and individual bronze medalist. She is still fighting to keep her bronze medal. And recently, the Swiss Federal Supreme Court agreed to still hear her appeal without
Mm-hmm.
getting too much into the weeds. It was over like her not submitting a score inquiry in time.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is she has Simone Biles' Netflix documentary that was just already recording, right? They were already
Mm-hmm.
recording for the documentary, and they actually have footage that shows that she did the inquiry within the appropriate time. And so she's actually using some of the documentary footage evidence to
Mm-hmm.
support her claim. And so we're just cheering her on. People
Yeah.
say, well, she has a gold medal. And I say, yeah, she has a gold medal. That's her team medal. But her bronze medal is her individual medal. And
Mm-hmm.
so we are saying good for her for standing up for something that belongs to her.
Mm-hmm.
They want her to turn her medal over to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
and you work a really long time, whether it be in law or in sports, you work your whole life to get to those points. And
Yeah.
so good for her for standing up for herself and working with her legal team to keep her medal. So
Yeah.
she is our Black Excellence Moment of the week. And before we go, is there anything else you would like the audience to know about you, like what organizations maybe you're a part of, or just anything with BET? I know I mentioned the NAACP and BET experience in June, but is there anything personally, any organizations, anything that you're a part of that you would like to shout out?
Well, I'm on the board of two organizations, the Council for Urban Professionals, which is near and dear to my heart, and then also the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership, which is primarily focused on underrepresented entrepreneurs, meaning like women and minorities. And so, you could probably see a common thread there, but those are two um, organizations, I think, that are really focused on making sure that there is a pipeline um, of Black excellence. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time. You are an exec, so I know that you're very, very busy. So thank you for taking the time to speak to our audience. There are a lot of legal and personal gems and advice I think that our audience will definitely take with them with this interview. And as always, we're rooting for everyone Black. We're rooting for everyone Black. Take care, everyone.